So we are rapidly approaching the end of Matthew's gospel account of Jesus' time here and his time during his ministry specifically, and what he's had to endure. And where we left off was the beginning of chapter 27, where we know that Jesus had a mock trial and he was brutalized. And it brought us to the point where now we'll pick up in chapter 27 in verse 35. And it says, when they had crucified him, they divided up his garments by casting lots. And sitting down, they kept watch over there, or they kept watch over him. And above his head, they posted a written charge against him. Now, this was the charge that was brought up from his trial that put him on the cross. This is Jesus, the King of the Jews. Now, we know today that that is absolutely true, that was Jesus, and he is the King of the Jews. So the charge against him was the truth. And yet it's what caused them to put him on that cross. And while he was there, we know that there were two robbers that were crucified with him, one on his right hand and the other on his left. So they had Jesus in the middle, and they had a robber on each side. And those who passed by, they watched them and looked up. They looked at Jesus like the robbers, a sinner, a blasphemer. And they heaped abuse on him, shaking their heads and saying, you who are going to destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross. In the same way, the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders were there, and they mocked him, saying, he saved others, but he cannot save himself. He is the King of Israel. Come down and get off the cross. And if he does, I will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God deliver him now if he wants him. What they said was prophetic, if you think about it. Let God deliver Jesus if that's what he wants. And we know that God did deliver Jesus, not from the cross, but from the grave. And so they didn't understand. They didn't have a clue what was going on that day. And they continued, they said, for he said, I am the Son of God, which once again, we know is truth. In the same way, even the robbers who were crucified with him berated him from the 6th hour until the 9th hour. There was darkness. It came over the whole land. And at the 9th hour, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? When some of those who were standing there heard this, they said, look, he's calling Elijah. And one of them quickly ran and brought a sponge. He filled it with some sour wine and he put it on a reed and he held it up for Jesus to drink. But the other said, leave him alone. Let us see if Elijah comes to save him. But when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he yielded up his spirit. And at that moment, at that instant, the veil of the temple that was in protecting between the holies and the Holy of Holies, where the presence of God had sat in the temple in Jerusalem, that great veil that went from the ceiling to the floor was torn right in two from top to bottom. The earth, it quaked, and the rocks were split. You know, this was the Son of God who gave up his spirit, who was forsaken, who was alone for an instant, for the first time and for the last time. And he was experiencing that separation when he cried out. And the Father, who was filled with pain through this whole ordeal, well beyond what even Isaac would have experienced with Abraham when Jesus died on the cross. But think about how Abraham would have felt taking the life of Isaac. But God stopped that. But in this case, this was the sacrifice, the only sacrifice acceptable to the Father for the sins of all mankind. And the Father was crushed, and he is love, and he had to do this with his own son. The, the earth quaked, the rocks split, the tombs broke open. And at that point, right there on that day, the bodies of many saints who had fallen asleep were raised. Now, this is a phenomenon, miraculous, supernatural. It's something which is beyond human explanation, beyond our intellect. What we know, Jesus raised Lazarus from the tomb. We know that the lady who was walking out to bury her only son, Jesus came up and gave the son back to the mother. Well, at this point, we know Jesus, who said, I am the resurrection and the life, had given his life. And at that instant, he was no longer in this world the way he once was. The bodies walked around. It says that after Jesus's resurrection, after he was resurrected from the grave, when they had come out of the tomb, they entered the holy city and they appeared to many people. So we know that when Jesus, who is the resurrection and the life, just as Lazarus, just as this other man was given back to his mother, that they were those who were saints, that according to God's purpose, they came out of their tombs. They entered the holy city. They appeared to many people. When the centurion and those who were with him, who were guarding Jesus, saw the earthquake and all that had happened, they were terrified. They were completely terrified. And they said, truly, this was the Son of God. And many women were there, watching from a distance. They had followed Jesus from Galilee to minister to him. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's sons. And when it was evening, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who himself was a disciple of Jesus. He went to Pilate, asked for the body of Jesus, and Pilate ordered that it would be given to him. So Joseph took the body, wrapped it in a clean linen cloth, and placed it in his own new tomb that he had cut into the rock. After placing it in there, they rolled a great stone across the entrance. So the tomb was sealed, and they went away. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were sitting there opposite the tomb. The next day, the one after the preparation day, the chief priests and Pharisees, they assembled before Pilate. Now they knew Jesus was dead. He was in the tomb. And now it's the day after that preparation that they did at the tomb. And they said, you know what? To Pilate, they said, we remember that while he was alive, that deceiver, Jesus, said that after 3 days, I will rise again. So give the order that the tomb be secured until the third day, because now they were in the second day. And otherwise, they said, his disciples may come and steal him away and tell the people that he had risen from the dead. This is how shifty they were. This is how maligned they had become. And this last deception, if they did this, would be worse than the first, he said. Pilate said, you have a guard. We'll make the tomb as secure as you know how. So they went and they secured the tomb by sealing the stone and posting the guard. And that was where Matthew left off in this portion of his gospel, chapter 27. We know at this point that Jesus was right where he chose to be, right where the Father purposed him to be, sanctified, because he fulfilled his purpose and was waiting for the resurrection. The tomb was being guarded. And when we pick up next, we'll finish Matthew's gospel. Amen.